coast of Normandy in France wasn't always called Omaha Beach. That was the code name given it by military planners 50 years ago. On the morning of June the 6th, 1944, the skies had just cleared. There'd been a pretty heavy storm throughout much of the night. And the largest military operation ever attempted was about to begin, the Allied invasion of Europe. And this was D-Day.
All you saw was one big fireball.
Men getting hit and screaming.
I have to admit I was scared.
I was dropping down. I thought, this guy was talking to him. These two guys, they're all dead.
The Germans had driven British and French forces from the coast of Europe 4 years earlier. Now, after 2 long years of delays, the massive battle plan would come together. A huge American army had been recruited and trained and equipped to help reclaim Europe from Hitler.
Hitler made a bet. And that bet was that my kids will beat the hell out of your kids.
We just knew that when the time came for the invasion, we would be in the forefront.
The trouble was that so many of the Americans who were sitting out there in the early morning light on the English Channel were in their teens and their early 20s, and very few of them had any experience in combat. And on their shoulders rested so many hopes and ambitions and dreams about this day. This beach was about to erupt into chaos of blood and fire. These are their stories, the men who became soldiers on that day. Only those who were here know how horrendous it was.
There was just chaos, confusion, and slaughter.
There, on the beach, were bodies of GIs. The water was full of blood, and they were dead.
It was the battle that turned boys to men.
I guess in times like that, the best comes out of people. If something has to be done, you do it.
It was the beginning of the long march to victory.
Turning point at Normandy. The Soldier Story with Peter Jennings.
Raindrops on roses.
January 1944. The Yanks have been coming to England for 2 years, but now it's 100,000 every month.
In 1944, almost no English person had ever seen an American, and vice versa.
You were supposed to be polite to the people, not make fun of their language.
Donald Jaquay, a high school football star from a small town in Ohio, joined the paratroopers on a dare.
We weren't supposed to go into the pubs and drink up all their beer, but they did, you know. It'd take about an hour to clean out a pub.
There was an ebullience about the American which was quite foreign to the English people of that time, particularly country people. It was refreshing. It was a breath of sort of warm Atlantic air.
That little country, it was just loaded with GIs. In the country, fields full of GI equipment there. You couldn't go anywhere it wasn't GIs.
Carl Wiest was exempt from the draft because of his job, but when he saw his friends going, he joined up.
The GIs are overpaid, they're oversexed, and they're over here. The British people put up with a lot. They sure did.
The Americans had very smart uniforms compared to the English. The materials were much better. They were very handsome young men as far as we were concerned.
The only trouble was girls. All English girls of that generation will tell you the same thing. This nice young man opened his mouth and it sounded like Clark Gable. The Americans did have tremendous success with the English girls, or Scottish girls, or Welsh girls, or Irish girls.
For nearly 2 million Americans, the excitement of wartime England makes the rugged training bearable. They are strong, young, and willing to take risks. Paul Parks came from Indiana with the Army Corps of Engineers.
18, 19-year-olds feel they're invincible. Death is not on your agenda. You figure that you'll go in and you'll come out. And you never think about the fact that you won't. The realities of combat had not hit us.
9 out of 10 of them had never been in combat. The first thing they will come up against is just across the English Channel, Hitler's Atlantic Wall. It is nearly 3,000 miles of concrete and steel running from Norway to the coast of Spain. The German defenders along the wall are experienced, disciplined, and motivated. They are commanded by the famous General Erwin Rommel. Rommel is convinced that any invasion must be stopped at the water's edge if Germany is to survive. The wall also looms large in the mind of another general who arrives in London on the night of January the 15th. Allied Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower and his officers know that they must go through the wall. There is no way around it. Day by day, the building of the Atlantic Wall, in fact, the whole progress of the war, was monitored deep beneath the streets of London here in the War Cabinet Map Room. We're about a block from the Prime Minister's residence at number 10 Downing Street, though Prime Minister Churchill sometimes slept here. And the latest developments were relayed to and from commanders across all of these secure telephone lines. It looks amazingly primitive to us today for such a gigantic operation. But if, for example, a German division were added to the French coast, they would know about it here within several hours. Now, the Germans fully expected the Allies were going to try to come across the Channel, and they expected they would come at the most obvious point where the Channel is narrowest, from Dover here on the English side to Calais in France. But the British proposed to surprise the Germans by moving the invasion about 120 miles to the southwest to Normandy, where the German defenses were less forbidding. Well, they were certainly forbidding. General Eisenhower decided to go with the strategy, and Supreme Allied headquarters began to draw up a battle plan. Timetables, tanks, artillery, infantry, and all the ships to carry them across the Channel. The vast military machine called Operation Overlord.
In effect, the stage is being set for the beginning of the great and crucial test all over the world.
On January the 21st, Eisenhower and his ground commander, British General Bernard Montgomery, agree on the operational plan. They will land 85,000 men, 5 divisions, on the beaches. The assault will begin at low tide, just after daybreak. American forces will land to the west at beaches codenamed Utah and Omaha. British and Canadian units will land at Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches to the east. 3 airborne divisions, 2 American and 1 British, will jump at night, 6 hours before the beach landings. The Americans will cut off the Cherbourg Peninsula on the west. The British will secure the eastern flank at the Orne River. Eisenhower and Montgomery order an audacious plan to conceal the most important secret of Overlord, the Normandy site. Montgomery calls on Colonel David Strangeways, an expert in military deception.
People think deception is to make the enemy think something. It's not. It's to make the enemy do something.
Strangeways writes a deception plan called Operation Fortitude. His masterstroke is the story of a fictitious 1st U.S. Army group, FUSAG, preparing to invade at Calais, which is exactly what the Germans expect.
And the story for D-Day was to make the enemy reinforce the Pas-de-Calais at the expense of the rail area.
The 1st U.S. Army group is a daring scam. There is fake radio traffic and dozens of radio operators, each representing a whole division. There are inflatable trucks, tanks, and landing craft, all for German reconnaissance to see and photograph. The secret army has an impressive commanding general, George Patton, a man respected and feared by the Germans. Patton commands no troops. But if the Germans are indeed fooled by the plan, it will appear that he leads nearly 1 million men. Hopefully, the fictitious army will divert the Germans. But the real troops, as yet untested, will come up against German soldiers in whom Hitler has expressed great confidence.
Hitler had made a bet when he declared war on the United States in December of 1941. And that bet was that My kids will beat the hell out of your kids, because my kids have grown up in a totalitarian society with all of its fanaticism. They've been brought up in the Nazi youth. They unquestioningly obey my orders. And you've got all that disorderliness of democracy and all that emphasis on individual rights.
Ike believes in his men. He believes Hitler will lose the bet. But he improves the odds with training that goes on day and night.
We were in the best shape, and I tell you, when you made your 5 parachute jumps after all the physical training, and they pinned those silver wings on your chest, you think you're a Superman. You're ready to take on anything or anybody.
Jack Schlegel was a 19-year-old from the Bronx. He was looking for excitement, and so he volunteered for the airborne.
We didn't know anything about the big picture. We just knew that when the time came for the invasion, we would be in the forefront of it.
They will be led by young officers who have little or no combat experience. One of them is Captain Walter Schilling, a 28-year-old Virginian who commands D Company of the 116th Infantry. Bob Slaughter remembers.
If you did your job, he was okay, but he didn't take any guff off of anybody. He was a tough son of a gun. In fact, in a minute, he'd take you out back and take his bars off, and he'd go at you. I mean, you know, he was that kind of a guy.
Captain Schilling has a family back home in Virginia, and he writes often to his daughter. Dearest Bobby, I tell you what I would like, a snapshot of you dressed up in your new coat and little muff. For I sure want to keep up with the changes my little girl is going through. 129 million kisses. Love always, Daddy. The men have still not been briefed on specifics, but when massive amphibious rehearsals begin, they know the time is near. Few, if any of them, know that in the history of warfare, most amphibious operations have failed.
Turning point at Normandy. The soldier. Turning point at Normandy. The soldier's story continues.
The troops have trained for months. As the days and nights go by, the training becomes tougher and more complex. Of all the troops in England, none train harder than a unit called the 2nd Rangers.
I often thought that the powers to be who thought up the things that we had to do in training were trying to find out how long you could stand on your feet before you collapsed or dropped dead.
Leonard Lomel was a sergeant in the Rangers, and they usually drew the toughest assignments.
We trained on cliffs hand over hand, no safety ropes, and that's a haul. Some men fell off the ropes, some fell off the front of the cliffs, some were killed, some were injured. We knew that there was a cliff in our future somewhere, but we didn't know where.
Without knowing their final destination, the training climaxes with a simulated landing. At dusk on April 27th, a fleet of landing ships carries 8,000 men to a beach in Lime Bay along the south coast. It is called Exercise Tiger. Just after midnight, German torpedo boats spot the convoy and attack. Two ships go to the bottom. More than 700 Americans are lost. The tragedy of Exercise Tiger threw Allied commanders into a tailspin, and they put a tight lid of secrecy on the operation. The trouble was that 10 of the men who were missing from the German attack knew the exact details of Overlord. They knew the date of the invasion, and they knew where it would take place. The question was, had they been picked up and been interrogated by the Germans? Allied commanders seriously considered changing invasion plans, but with about 6 weeks only to go, General Montgomery ordered an exhaustive search of the waters of Lime Bay. And within days, investigators were able to report that the bodies of the 10 men had been found. There was a collective sigh of relief, but after that, secrecy about Overlord became an obsession. As security is tightened further, Prime Minister Churchill bans all civilian road traffic into southern England. Anxiety is such that censorship is imposed on diplomatic mail. Then, in the 5 weeks before D-Day, crossword puzzles in the London Daily Telegraph contain 5 top-secret Allied code names. The puzzle editor is interrogated by Scotland Yard. The investigators conclude it's a coincidence. Their report satisfies no one, but overlord planning goes on. By now, British intelligence has added yet another layer of deception to the story of Patton's fake army, using about a dozen German double agents the British control. Through them, the Allies feed Berlin exactly what they want the Germans to know. Some information is false, but much of it is true.
If we provided the Germans with a reasonably good intelligence service, they wouldn't have the incentive to go on sending in more agents. And then the realization dawned on us that we did in fact control all the German agents here. And at that point, we realized that there was a great potential for deception.
One of the most trusted double agents is the Spaniard Juan Pujol, codenamed Garbo. To lend his reports the ring of truth, he is permitted to visit areas near Allied bases, airfields, and harbors. Garbo's reports amplify and confirm the story of the Phantom Army coming to Calais. By May, German intelligence estimates that the Allies have at least 92 divisions in England. The real number is 35. And if the amazing deception can be sustained, the imaginary army will appear big enough to pin the German troops down in Calais, even after Overlord begins in Normandy. To destroy invasion forces on the beach, Rommel wants to bring German tanks right up to the coast. But when his superiors deny him control of the tanks, Rommel must improvise. He orders more anti-tank barriers. He studs the beaches with obstacles and hundreds of thousands of mines. He floods acres of farmland to obstruct glider and paratroop landings. Rommel had been especially displeased with the situation in Normandy.
Und nachher sagte uns unser Kompanieführer. Afterwards, our company commander told us that Rommel had been very angry and lost his temper about the primitive arrangements in our post, and had said the bay would provide a perfect landing site.
General Rommel sees that Normandy will be attractive to Allied invaders, but he cannot believe they will risk a landing where there is no harbor. It would be impossible, he thinks, to unload men and equipment across an open beach fast enough to sustain an invasion. Allied planners are looking for a way to do it. One solution is small landing craft that can quickly unload troops right on the beach. And in English ports, the British are building floating harbors, codenamed mulberries, they will take with them to Normandy. Huge concrete segments will be sunk off the beach to form a harbor. This had never been done before, but it had to work. The entire flow of Allied reinforcements depended on it. To keep the Germans from bringing up reinforcements, Eisenhower orders extensive bombing of French railroad facilities. In the weeks before D-Day, 76,000 tons of bombs are dropped. May 29th, the Great Crusade, as Eisenhower calls it, finally begins. They have been briefed in sealed camps, and now they move to a dozen ports, in convoys stretching 100 miles.
We went through town, and we didn't know for sure that we were leaving for good, but we sort of had a hint because we took everything with us, you know, all the kitchen equipment and all of the supplies and so forth. And the people at Ivy Bridge somehow knew because they were looking out windows, waving and crying, women, you know, with tears rolling down their face, even the men. Some of the men were. And of course, the GIs that had girlfriends there, they were crying.
It was a very gratifying feeling saying, holy smoke, look at all this stuff. How can we ever lose a war?
It was an astonishing sight. The whole of England, that part of England, being given over to this one thing. A local ice cream van found its way down to the loading hard, and by accident he got caught up in the crowd, and he was landed in Normandy. He couldn't get out. I mean, once you got into the stream, you'd had it. You couldn't go backwards.
I suppose it affected most guys the way it would anybody. The death was going to be imminent. A day or two before we had made our last will and testament.
We laid in our bunks talking, wondering if we were going to be able to carry out our assigned tasks, or whether we were going to run the other way or be fearful.
You just feel pretty much alone. And just out, and all that's out there lurking is just the German army and death.
The Armada now sails to a rendezvous area and awaits the go-ahead. The training is over. June the 5th, 1944, will be D-Day.
Turning point at Normandy. The soldier story will continue in a moment. The Soldier's Story will continue after this from our ABC stations.
Saturday.
Turning point at Normandy. The Soldier's Story continues. The following depiction of the invasion of Normandy consists of actual film footage and photographs taken in France in 1944, as well as scenes shot in other locations during World War II.
June the 4th. For the Germans, scanning the horizon from their defensive positions along Normandy, only a weather front seems to be moving in. That morning, General Rommel leaves his headquarters heading back to Germany. He hopes to arrive in time for his wife's birthday. He will also try to meet with Hitler to plead for more control of the Western defenses. The worsening weather convinces him there will not be an invasion. And as he leaves, he says, if there is one, they will never get off the beaches. Poised to go, the Allied Armada is hit by a violent storm in the Channel. General Eisenhower is forced to postpone the invasion. The ships must hold at sea. For the troops, it means seasickness and a longer time to be afraid. The storm was still raging at 4:30 in the morning on June the 5th when General Eisenhower and his top Allied commanders met here in this room at Southwick House on the south coast of England. They had come here to make the crucial decision of Operation Overlord, to go or not to go. The Royal Air Force meteorologist had predicted that there would be a clearing along the Normandy coast in about 24 hours, but he had no idea how long it would last. General Eisenhower's dilemma was acute. They could risk going ahead, not knowing if the weather would be any good in 24 hours, or they could delay the invasion yet again. Delay it for at least 2 weeks, because it would take that long before they would have the right combination of low tides and a bright moonlit night, which they needed. Eisenhower's staff was divided, but only he could make the decision. Finally, he said, let's go.
Veuillez écouter maintenant des messages personnels.
Allied intelligence has been using the public airwaves of the British Broadcasting Corporation to communicate with French resistance groups. On the afternoon of the 5th, the first of two long-awaited coded messages are broadcast. The invasion is imminent.
The first message, it's hot in Suez, was broadcast. I had butterflies in my stomach. It was the message that was to come on the eve of D-Day.
Clarisse a les yeux bleus.
The second message was literally the dice on the table, on the carpet, was for action.
On the evening of June 5th, I heard the message. I was in my bedroom and I went down to the kitchen where my parents were and said, "This is it!"
When they hear the messages, French resistance groups work through the night, blowing up railroad tracks and otherwise interrupting communication lines from the Normandy coast to the rest of France. The Germans are also monitoring the BBC broadcasts. They had even deciphered the Allied code words that would send the resistance into action. But the German officers in charge issue nothing more than a vague warning about possible terrorism. They have missed the point. The largest naval assault force ever assembled is entering the Channel from a dozen English ports. The troops learn now that H hour, the moment they'll be hitting the beach, will be 6:30 tomorrow morning. Captain Walter Schilling gathers his men.
As you know, he said, this is the real McCoy, this is it. He said, I know you can do it. And he said, I'm proud to lead this group. into combat.
Many of the men take this last opportunity to write home. Captain Schilling writes again to his young daughter. Dearest Bobby, now if something should happen to Daddy, never forget my love for you. Always love and stick by your mother. Some of this you won't understand now, but in years to come you will. Until I write again, always, your Daddy. 10 p.m., June the 5th. The American 101st Airborne is preparing for its nighttime attack. Along with paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne, their objective is to secure the route inland from Utah Beach so that Allied troops landing on the beach can advance. For most, it is their first jump into combat.
We knew this was it. We had been issued live ammunition for our guns. It sobers you up. You really begin to intensely think about all the things you've trained for and done and wish you'd done them better.
They knew it was the night. They could hardly wait to go, really. Pumped up and ready to go. It's all business. Is your equipment ready? You sure you've checked your gun? And the same way with us air crews, that's what we were doing too. I probably inspected that airplane of mine 5 times that night.
Our chances, without a doubt, was less than 50-50. And we knew it.
Just before takeoff, the Supreme Commander himself makes a surprise visit. Eisenhower's senior British air commander had recommended that the entire airborne assault be canceled. He predicted that as many as 70% of these men would die. But Eisenhower is convinced that the invasion depends on them. It is an agonizing decision, but the assault simply has to go forward.
They know that the chaplain is in one of those planes. And that is a reassuring thing for them.
George Wood, the chaplain of the 82nd Airborne, will jump with his men.
This was the biggie. Everyone was taking it very, very seriously. There was a different atmosphere, and even now as I'm talking about it, the chills are going up my back.
They begin to take off from more than 22 air bases. At Tarrant, Rushton Field are the glider teams of the British 6th Airborne. For these men, the word airborne has a different meaning. They will be carried in fragile gliders, motorless plywood aircraft, which the men have dubbed flying coffins. Major John Howard led the 6 glider teams.
So we all prepared for battle, and we went right through the drill, right up to 8 or 9 o'clock when we blacked all our faces for night fighting and checked all our ammunition for the last time and got ready to get into the troop-carrying vehicles to take us up to the airfield.
They must capture intact and then hold 2 strategic bridges on the eastern flank of the invasion. This will prevent the German tanks from joining the battle and will allow British and Canadian troops to advance.
I went round and said goodbye to all the chaps, each glider in turn, And by the time I got back to my glider, I had a football in my throat as I could hardly speak, you know, with emotion.
I always remember the glider taking off because my wife gave me a small New Testament Bible. As we was taxiing across, I wrote in the front, left England for France, 23:05. That was the time our glider started going up the runway.
The 6 gliders tethered to Halifax bombers are towed for the 80-mile trip across the Channel, then cut loose to drift down silently into the darkness. By midnight, the last of some 800 C-47s carrying the American paratroopers takes off for Normandy. Walking back to his car, Eisenhower says to his driver, "Well, it's on."
We took off and there was a fella in the plane and he kept singing this song, "Down and down we go, round and round we go." That old Black Magic. It was a popular tune of that, and I said, you know, that sounds too appropriate for this occasion.
Lieutenant Bodak, he used to point out, and he says, you see the first 5 guys here in a row, 4 of them are going to be dead within 5 minutes after we land there. It's the wrong type of pep talk to give to anybody going into combat.
I have to admit I was scared. Sure, you're 21 years old and you've never been in combat before, and you're jumping out of an airplane into the dark of night. You have no idea what you're going to be running into.
For his last order of the day, General Eisenhower allows Allied intelligence to deliberately send a message to the Germans through Garbo, the double agent. He warns, an assault force has left England for France. The information will enhance Garbo's credibility with the Germans. At this critical moment, it is essential to persuade them that Normandy is still only a diversion.
Turning point at Normandy. The soldier's story will continue in a moment.
Midnight, the first hour of D-Day. The ships of the Allied fleet converge in the English Channel. German radar along the Normandy coast picks up some strange echoes. Radar operator Hans Fabb was perplexed and called another station for clarification. He gets a remarkable reply.
He said he had targets on his radar because he was directly on the water. Targets that were steady targets, which have a reflection like ships normally make. And he said, but that many ships don't exist.
The ships in the channel, however, are real. And so are the planes overhead, roaring toward the Normandy coast.
All we could see through the little porthole things that we had in those gliders was hundreds and hundreds of bombers. The general feeling was, we're fed up with this damn war. Let's get it over. Let's get into the continent and deal with these bloody Nazis. And that was the feeling that was in everybody, and even stamped out fear. I mean, fear of crash landing in the middle of the night in a glider.
All the lads started singing rude songs and all their different songs, you know, and Long Way to Tipperary and things like that. And then when we approached the French coast, John gave the orders, right, quiet, and everything went quiet.
Approaching their target, they will be the first men to fight and die in France.
Our intention was to capture those bridges, and we had every confidence in doing so, provided the glider pilots got us somewhere near the objective. That was the key issue that night. You all link arms, a man either side of you. You do the butcher's grip, and you lift your legs, and you just pray to God your number isn't up. And that's all you can do. You're in the hands of those glider pilots. My God, they couldn't have got any closer. They were exactly where on the model back in England I'd said I want one there, one there, one there. And they damn well put them there. As I broke my way out of that glider, I saw the nose of the glider was through that wire fence, and I could see the bridge 50 yards away from me. And as I ran up behind the platoon, up this track, I heard the thump of the smoke bomb, and then thum, thum, thum in the grenades. For about 15 minutes, there was a hand-to-hand stuff skirmishing going on all around the bridges. We had complete surprise. We absolutely overran them.
Pegasus Bridge, the first victory of D-Day. Now they must take their defensive positions and wait for reinforcements. The eastern flank of the operation is secured, and 13,400 American paratroopers are heading toward the operation's western flank. Their convoy of C-47s is 300 miles long and 9 planes wide. Wingtip to wingtip, the planes are separated by only 100 feet.
Paratroop drop, we were very close formation, as you wanted to keep your troops concentrated when they hit the ground. And the closer you were, why, the closer they were when they got on the ground. And flying that tight formation is a difficult task. It takes every bit of your being to just stay in there.
I sat right smack opposite the navigator. His last name was Ward. He said, "Where are you from, trooper?" And I said, "I'm from the Bronx." He said, "Yeah, where?" I said, "Near Preston Avenue." Hey, my God, he says, I live on Marion Avenue. That's what we were talking about mostly. Not the war, not anything. We were talking about the Bronx.
As soon as we got within vision of the French coast, the anti-aircraft fire started.
Pop, 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 pop. We had a whole string of tracer bullets coming right in the middle of the fuselage. And everybody's pulling their feet back.
By that time, the anti-aircraft fire had gotten so fierce that the plane was going through all kind of gyrations.
Many of the guys were actually shot in the plane, but went out anyway, just to get out of that plane.
Boom! Whop! A shudder, and one of the engines got hit, and the plane started to go to the left.
Amber light came on, and then the green light.
We just simply had to commend our spirit to the Lord God and go out that plane.
My chute oscillated around. I could see the plane, and he was still flying in this, and then all of a sudden, all you saw was one big fireball. And I thought to even in that split second when I was dropping down, I thought, this guy was talking to, and these two guys, they're all dead.
The chute opened, and I could look off to the left, and I would say maybe 2 to 3 miles to the left, I could see this burning village. It was St. Mary-Église.
The town of St. Mary-Église, 6 miles inland from Utah Beach, is a key target for the paratroopers. But they are not supposed to come down directly into the town square. Raymond Paris remembers what happened.
It was total panic. The Germans were shooting at all these guys.
That'll really put the fear in you, if anything will, when you realize somebody's aiming at you and somebody's taking a deliberate shot at you.
Quand j'ai entendu un bruit de branches cassées.
I heard the sound of broken branches. I looked up and I realized it was a paratrooper falling through the branches and got caught, hanging about 4 meters off the ground. There were 2 Germans next to me. They took their machine guns, and before the poor boy could even move a muscle, they killed him.
They'd lost all their formation, and what had been planned is a nice concentrated drop that would immediately bring together at least a battalion of paratroopers. They were scattered all over the place.
When we jumped in there, we jumped in, and we were in so many different little groups, fighting everywhere, that the Germans had no idea where we were.
We were all scattered into singles, doubles, triples, and stuff like that.
We eventually picked up about a dozen people, and then we moved on toward what we thought was the proper direction to go.
In the darkness, American troops have a way of telling friend from foe.
We had these crickets to help us identify each other at night.
We had these little clickers, you know.
We didn't know what to make of it. There was croaking over here, over there. Then we found out what this noise was. We found these clickers on the Americans we captured. So we took them, and now we could click too.
A guy comes up behind me, I'm snapping my cricket. He says, "Chaplain, if you don't shut that damn thing off, we're all going to be killed."
As it turns out, the clicking helps to confuse the Germans, as do the various landings being made all over this part of Normandy. The Americans are disorganized, but they're harassing the Germans at every turn.
It was a benefit to the Americans because of the way it confused the Germans, had them dashing here, there, everywhere, looking for American units.
The Germans cannot discern any pattern to the assault, and since it doesn't appear to be an invasion, their most effective weapon, the Panzer tank units, do not move. Hans von Luck commanded a regiment of the 21st Panzer Division.
My idea was to counterattack immediately, to make advantage of the confusion when in the pitch dark night people are landing until they find together they have no heavy weapons. But I couldn't because there was this general order not to move.
Some German units did go into action against the paratroopers, and they captured hundreds of them. But for the most part, the overall German reaction was uncoordinated and confused. They simply did not know whether or not this was the invasion. It might just have been an airborne raid. At the big gun emplacements all up and down the Atlantic Wall, the young Germans who manned these guns were asleep in their bunkers. They hadn't the vaguest idea there was fighting inland, and their commanders were all at a strategy session 100 miles away. The Germans had designated all of these particular gun positions. This one was called Resistance Nest number 62. What the Germans did not realize was that on another set of maps, they were smack in the middle of Omaha Beach. At dawn, the facts become clear. The alarm goes out in Franz Gockel's Omaha Beach bunker.
There were so many ships, it was unbelievable. The whole force, for us, there was no doubt. It was the invasion.
Texas battleship was about a mile to our right, lobbing those big 2,000-pound missiles into the coastline.
It is the largest naval bombardment in history. 6 battleships, 20 cruisers, 68 destroyers. It lasts for 40 minutes.
It was a glorious sight to see the big belch of orange flame out of those big guns. The barrels seemed like they were red hot, just pumping one shell after another.
The philosophy was that if you subjected the defenders ashore to about 40 minutes of intense noise, bang, 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 and then get that to a crescendo up to the time of landing, and then could get your troops to go in the next 3 minutes. The chaps were still, recovering from the noise.
It was otherworldly, the way the earth shook and trembled. Then this wall of fire moved past the beach obstacles through the seawall towards us, meter by meter. And I watched it until it was 200 or 300 meters from me, and then I crawled under my machine gun in the earth bunker, and I curled up as small as I could and stuck my head in the dirt, and I just prayed. Help me, Mary. The time has come, now and for all eternity.
Turning point at Normandy, the soldier's story. When we come back, the beach landings begin.
struck by 10,000 tons of bombs. After permitting the first breach in the Atlantic Wall, the German army was still able and ready to fight. And it was a formidable army. The battle for D-Day was far from certain. We'll continue.
Turning point at Normandy. The soldier's story will continue after this from our ABC stations. Turning point at Normandy. The soldier's story continues.
More than 5,000 vessels approach the Normandy coast. This is H hour. It is the turning point between training and fighting. 2/3 of the American force is to land at Omaha.
We needed to go in and, as you use the term they use in the South, to whoop them.
I went around to some of my old buddies, especially the ones from Roanoke, and shaking hands, and saying, see you on the beach, good luck, and all that kind of stuff. Are your men ready? I says, yeah, they're ready. Are yours? And he says, yep, they're ready. And you can't let your buddy down. You know that he's not going to let you down. You can't let him down. And you don't want him to know that you're afraid, and he doesn't want me to know that he's afraid. So you act bold and you act fearless. And it's a big act because you're scared to death.
Not having any combat experience, you believe what you're told.
We were told that the beach had 22 pillboxes on it, our sector, but only 1 or 2 of them would be manned. The rest of them would be empty.
And then you'd go and you'd attack this place and find out it was occupied by a few troops, like a German heavy weapons company that blew your fannies off. Generally speaking, I never paid much attention to Army intelligence. That's an oxymoron. Their intelligence stunk.
The young GIs do not know that Allied aerial bombs have not fallen on the German bunkers at Omaha, nor that the naval bombardment has not taken out the pillboxes. And they have no idea that the troops of a German infantry division have just been moved up as reinforcements. All they know is that something has gone terribly wrong.
We couldn't get in too close to shore because a lot of the beach obstacles hadn't been blown yet. Then we could see these big black fumes of smoke, and we knew that the German artillery had opened up.
Coxswain in our boat was British and a British sailor. He wanted to let the ramp down way up, 200 or 300 yards from shore. Willard said, no, you're not. Says, you're going to take us all the way in, so we've got heavy equipment. He said, well, I'll be killed. He said, I don't give a damn. He said, you're going to take them all the way in. Morphley pulled out his .45 and stuck it up to his head, and he says, you're going to take them all the way in. And so we went all the way in.
When that ramp went down, one of the good buddies of ours started to cry and scream. He says, I can't go in, Claire, I can't. He says, you gotta go. Get on shore as fast as you can and get up that beach.
Manche Boote sofort getroffen wurden, oder dass
several boats were hit, and 20 or 30 GIs that had jumped up ran smack into a shell and were blown up. And soon there was a large number of GIs lying on the beach.
The first company to hit the beach at Omaha was Company A of the 116th Infantry of the 29th Division. They lost 96% in the first 2 minutes of their effectiveness without firing a shot. They were just mowed down.
When you visualize the Germans up there, we had to do something about that. And they were up there firing down on us. Boat leader as I was, I went straight ahead and was the first one wounded. A German shot me through my right side, through the muscle. It didn't hit any important organs. Spun me around, burned a little bit, I kept going.
Sergeant LeMail and 225 Rangers must scale the steep cliffs on the right flank of Omaha. Their job is to take out not only the machine guns firing down on them, but also the big German guns aimed at Utah Beach.
My platoon, the 2nd Platoon of Company D, was up those cliffs within a matter of minutes. And when we got up there, we moved from shell crater to shell crater. After we got through the first line of resistance, the Germans inland laid down a barrage on top of the point, trying to knock the Rangers off the edge of the cliffs. So we had to move fast to keep ahead of the crawling fire, which was coming up our back.
On the top, only 90 out of 225 Rangers are still fighting. They discover that the huge German guns they must knock out are 700 yards back from the cliff. Sergeant LeMail and his buddy Jack Kuhn sneak up to the guns and with grenades quickly put them out of action. At Juneau, the Canadian beach, 10 miles to the east, the seas are rough. Everything is late getting underway. Private Alan Williams was on a newly designed swimming tank. Many of them sank in the choppy water before they could make it to the beach. Many crews drowned.
We're going off. We're floating in. The driver and the co-driver, they're sitting up to their chests in water. We had to stop and let them up there. They would have drowned.
The troops hitting the British beaches find heavy resistance at first, but it collapses after a furious assault. Very quickly, men are over the seawall and fighting Germans on village streets. On Utah, the troops are swept by tides to a beach half a mile away, but luck proves to be on their side. Incredibly, they have less than 200 casualties. Back at Omaha, there is no such luck.
There were a bunch of erratic landings of scattered people.
Men getting hit and screaming and, you know, and people drowning.
It was just chaos, confusion, and slaughter.
You could see the bullets kicking up.
I knew that we were in a heap of trouble. We weren't even expecting anything like this.
You could hear the agony, it was very audible, the agony.
The entire beach was filled with Americans shot down by our fire. We couldn't understand how the Americans, despite their heavy losses and under our fire, still managed to keep charging forward.
They keep coming because that's the plan. Hour upon hour. They are seasick. They stumble forward out of the boats and onto the beach. They must go all out for the seawall, each with more than 60 pounds of equipment. One order is clear: do not stop to help the wounded. You may get hit yourself. It is an order John Talton couldn't obey. And even today, he remembers the names of his injured comrades.
Mister had been hit on one side of the head, and his eyeball was hanging down by the muscles or whatever it is, down on his cheek. Raymer had lost his hat, and he had a triangular-shaped wound. They were in water up to their shoulders, and they were jumping up and down. And I guess my conscience overrode everything else. So I went out and got them and brought them up to where they could move on their own. Just helping the buddies, I'd like to put it that way.
By mid-morning, the Allied officers offshore can find no way to assess the situation on Omaha. All they can see is smoke. Only a few radios are transmitting from the beach. But returning boats report to the American ground commander, General Omar Bradley, that casualties are terrible and the beach is blocked.
At that time, Bradley thought, well, I might have to withdraw them. I might have to withdraw those that are already ashore and meanwhile divert the ones that are supposed to be going in at Omaha, divert them over here to Utah and pull those kids out of Omaha. And he went through that agony for maybe as long as 2 hours.
For all their anguish, the top commanders who have planned the battle in great detail can never themselves make it succeed. but on the beach at Omaha are many men who could.
The American junior officers in that beach looked at that situation and said, we stay here, we're dead. We can't retreat. We're not going to get up those ravines. Follow me. And they started leading up the bluff.
The ordinary serviceman, confronted with that situation, would measure up, would rise to the occasion and do the right thing. And even though you may call it a heroic act, he'll do it because he knows that's what I've got to do.
We'd lost all of our key people, all of our officers nearly. We lost, I believe it was 5 or 6 officers in my company were killed. We didn't have any leadership.
Bob Slaughter saw his commanding officer get hit by mortar fire. Captain Walter Schilling, who had written so many times to his daughter.
I guess in times like that, the best comes out of people. If something has to be done, you do it.
Late in the day, the situation on the beaches of Normandy is precarious. But Hitler's Atlantic Wall has been breached.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast.
At home, Americans wake up to the news of the long-awaited invasion.
Upon the Great Crusade. Moments ago, the president held his first post-invasion press radio conference.
But D-Day on the home front soon turns into a day of prayer.
Our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor.
For those at home, there are no pictures from the front and no news of casualties. At the end of the day, on the beaches of Normandy, as the shelling finally tapers off, the survivors are able to pause for breath and look around.
I'd never seen a dead person in my life. Never had occasion to. And there, on the beach, were bodies of GIs. The water was full of blood, and they were dead.
I remember there was a man from Patterson, New Jersey. He said, Talton, if you ever get to Patterson, he said, the city is yours. He was in bad shape, stomach and everything else. Sure would like to see him today.
So it was a strange feeling to know that you were in a hostile territory and that this was only the beginning. We'd survived the first day, but it was only the beginning.
It was as if the light drew me as a magnet.
Near-death experience.
It was really beyond imagination.
Millions say they've been there between life and death. It turned this scientist into a spiritual healer.
I think what I learned was that there truly is no death.
Dramatic new research in the search for the human soul. Is it real or all in the mind? Diane Sawyer, Turning Point, next week.
If you travel to this place, you could be threatened by an angry mob.
They want...
Turning Point at Normandy. The soldier's story continues.
The invasion of Normandy never slows down. The Allies have established their 5 beachheads. But they risk losing everything if they cannot bring in reinforcements fast enough and fight hard enough.
There were Germans everywhere. They were moving through us as they were trying to evacuate the beach, and they were trying to reinforce the beach, so they had Germans moving both directions.
As the Allies struggled up off the beaches, they soon realized how deceptive the beautiful Norman countryside was. Because on either side of every lane and around every field, these tall hedgerows, seemingly harmless, planted by the Celts hundreds of years ago, turned out to be thick and dense and provide excellent cover for the Germans.
We didn't know how to fight in the hedgerows. We hadn't prepared for it. You'd fight all day for one hedgerow, for 1 acre. and you'd lose half your company just about doing it, and you'd go for another one.
Progress was slow, and fatalities were starting to mount. There just was not too much room to maneuver.
Most of the German troops stationed in Normandy are not Hitler's best, and they were not expecting to bear the brunt of the main Allied invasion. But they fight, and they fight hard.
We had sworn an oath. Fatherland, homeland, family. We must make every effort so Germany doesn't lose the war, and we keep our opponents away from our borders. That was, in fact, our motto.
Gutes, Feuerbereit!
While the Germans and the Allies struggle over every inch of ground, the Allies' control of the skies is a devastating advantage. They fly thousands of sorties every day.
As long as the Allied fighter bombers were flying, any movement was practically impossible. It was more like a hunt, except that we were the ones being hunted.
Far from the battle, but affecting every soldier in the field, is the last act of deception run by the Allies through Garbo. On the night of June the 8th, the double agent taps out a message designed to mislead the Germans one last time.
The present assault is a large-scale operation, but diversionary in character. The whole of the present attack is to set a trap.
Hitler and his chief of staff receive Garbo's message, and they buy it completely. It confirms what they have been led to believe already, and they wait for the main invasion to come at Calais.
We couldn't believe it. I mean, it was so successful. They were 15 days holding their forces in the wrong place. At that vital, by 15 days, it didn't matter damn what they did.
That was the best chance the Germans had to win the Battle of France, was to get that armor down there into the battle before Eisenhower could get armor across from England.
By the time General Eisenhower steps ashore at Omaha Beach on June the 12th, the Allies are comfortably able to replace all the equipment they lose. This is made possible by towing two gigantic artificial harbors, the Mulberries, from England and establishing them on the beach. Within 2 weeks of the invasion, 15,000 tons of supplies are coming ashore every day.
I couldn't believe what went through that beach. It's unbelievable what went through there. Man, you felt big. There was no doubt you were going to win it then. No doubt.
Now a new feeling also naturally began that we didn't know before. We began to be afraid. I still regret that in those days it wasn't ended through surrender, because Hitler had said, if the Allies succeed in setting foot on French soil and we don't succeed in throwing them back in the sea, then we have lost the war.
The tide of battle has turned, and from now on, only the Allies have the resources to replace the men and machines being lost every day. Over the next 3 months, they liberate town after town. D-Day is behind them. The German surrender is still 11 months away. Between is a winter of horror, the day-to-day grimness of war. The Germans suffer 400,000 casualties during the Battle of Normandy. The Allies, more than 200,000. Bob Slaughter, who saw his company commander killed on Omaha Beach, lost another trusted officer on the push inland towards St. Lo. Major Tom Howey had promised his men he would see them when they liberated the town.
He was killed by mortar shell shrapnel, hit him in the chest. And General Gerhardt, the 29th Division commanding officer, he said, well, we're going to make sure that Tom gets to St. Lo. So he propped him up in a Jeep, and he took him into St. Lo, and at the only church halfway standing when we got there, they laid him in state there on a pile of rubble and put an American flag over it. All of it was terrible. There's hardly a day that goes by that you don't think about it.
Turning point at Normandy, the soldier's story, will continue in a moment.
So much of the world counted on these men to become soldiers that day, which they did. 23,000 of them died in the battle for Normandy. It was a massive and terrible clash of arms. Half a century later, looking back on that remarkable and pivotal day is to be in awe of what the Allies accomplished. But to be here in the American cemetery at Normandy is also to be reminded of how appalling the cost. So many thousands of young men whose families decided they should remain here on the foreign soil they fought so valiantly to liberate. To be with them is to be profoundly grateful to them and to those who lived, who fought to keep us free.
That's a wonderful thing to have accomplished. Imagine if Hitler had survived, or if Mussolini had survived. What a different world this be.
With all its horror, war is a time when one puts selfish motives aside, and in our case, this was the salvation of civilization.
God rest their souls over there that lie on foreign soil, and I think of them every day.
They were heroes, and they were all heroes.
I'm Ted Koppel. Later on Nightline, professional tennis. It's a sport in which children can make millions, but sometimes at a terrible cost. The Jennifer Capriati story, tonight.
This is Joan London.
And Charles Gibson.
Tomorrow, how rock and roll has merged with interactive computer technology.
Plus the king of the Cowboys, Roy Rogers, and basketball's Bill Walton.
On Good Morning America, here on ABC.
For a transcript, send $10 to Journal Graphics 1530.